Welcome to episode number... I want to say 4. I want to say
5, but I'm not sure anymore.
Oh, okay. Well, 4.5 of Bard's Backlog. We'll check.
Yeah, I like that.
The right number will be on there when we put it up. But this is Josh Gallegos, of course, at Video Game Bard on Twitter. And joining me, as always this week, the casual, Jared Benson. Jared,
hello,
how
everyone.
are you?
Oh, I'm hanging in there, my man. It's been craziness.
Yeah. I mean, you were just telling me a little bit about your work stuff and some very real life issues going on. And of course, the world right now. I mean, this is kind of our COVID update episode. We haven't really touched on it a whole lot, nor has it been as serious as it is now in our last episodes. But we can talk about that in just a moment. Of course, like I said, this is Bard's Backlog, the ever-growing catalog of video games inducted into the Hall of Games. Jared and I are the gatekeepers and subsequent executioners of any video game candidate.
I love that.
Including today's. Last time when we got together, which was like 3 weeks now.
Yeah, 3 weeks, yep.
Yeah, was on Fortnite, of course, the ever-popular, ever-prevalent Fortnite. And it, against my best wishes, ended up in the Hall of Games. Although I have to admit that it was well worth putting into the Hall of Games. So, but you guys can go and listen to that episode if you are curious about that. And as a part of just the introduction here, and as we're going through getting ready for the episode itself, I do want to say, as far as my content is going, due to COVID and other life complications, including my being in and out of the hospital, the Video Game Bard, as I like to call myself, the suite of products that I was trying to get out this year is just going to have to be delayed for a period of time. I'm hoping to be able to, at some point this year, produce a whole other podcast outside of this one. But with everything going on, it's not the right time. The season that we're in is kind of a little bit messy, and my own life is a little bit too messy for me to be able to tackle more than one of these at a time. So I just want to say also just publicly, thank you, Jared, for helping me. This has been definitely a strange and difficult place that we're in, and your own willingness to help me out on the hosting on the side of this stuff has been awesome. So thanks, man.
Always, my friend. Yeah.
But with that said, we're just putting the rest on hold. If you are a listener and have enjoyed the product thus far, we will continue to produce Bard's Backlog. And hopefully in the future, you'll see a little bit more from me. But that's kind of where we're at right now. Of course, you can submit questions to us via Twitter or even any other social media, at least on my side of things. I am at Video Game Bard on both Twitter and Instagram. And then Jared is at Jared T. Ben on Twitter. If you guys could reach him there, he is always on there waxing eloquent about something or other.
Often bothering people and ticking them off, but that's all right.
I like the way that you engage, though. I've been able to, because of the fact that I've been engaging with your tweets a little more, actually see your stuff more often.
Sure, my replies and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And you always ask interesting things or pose unique questions to people. So always enjoy reading that. And of course, you guys can follow us there, submit questions that way, specifically for the default segment. And you know what? I'm going to call out the audience a little bit here because I know that people are listening. I have the metrics on my side. And despite the fact people are listening, not a whole lot of people, and by a lot of people I mean nobody, is writing in, at least right now, over the last couple episodes. So get off your lazy bums. I mean, come on now. Let's write in a question. I mean, if there's something that pops into your brain that you're vividly curious about, if there's some horrific detail about a game that you want to point out, or maybe something that we said that you want to take issue with, please feel free to write in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd like to get your feedback in that way. If you'd like to support the podcast outside of that, I'd say the best way to do that would be through reviews on iTunes. That is where a lot of push in like advertising comes from them, and then even on other podcast services, including Spotify, they look at those and rate your podcast accordingly. So I guess just some things to keep in mind as we go on through this, of course, episode of Bard's Backlog, either 4 or 5, whichever one it is. It's so terrible. I should probably know exactly which episode this is, but whatever. It is what it is. We have so many other things to worry about. How has COVID affected you, my friend?
So Florida just went into lockdown officially.
Okay.
Took effect last night, I think. Either that or it's like tonight or tomorrow night, something like that. This week, official lockdown, Governor DeSantis. And that means, no cars on the road after 5 p.m. unless you're on your way to work or you're an essential worker or something like that. Walmart shuts down even earlier now. Before this, it was shutting down at 8. And they only had, the one right near me, they only had one entrance open, things like that. It was getting more and more tedious to go about, normal business. So it's been kind of frustrating. Everyone's on edge. Everyone's got that weird look in their eyes. You know what I mean? It's just
I pictured it immediately. That's why I laugh so hard. No, you're totally right.
Because a lot of people don't know who to trust, where to look, and so for me, it's affected. Like, it's just on my mind all the time. You know how stressful it is to have something on your mind all the time? It's just frustrating.
No, I get it, and it's like this ever-present thing, and you can tell like other people are, like you said, the shifty eyes, and it's just becoming. We've been on lockdown for like a week and a half. I think at this point. So we shut down a little earlier. The shelter in place, I think, is the technical one that it's called. And the effects have been interesting. At the same time, though, like, I think it's also been somewhat of a healthy kind of setback for people. I can't help but think that, spending more time with things that are valuable, including family, is worthwhile. And it definitely gets people to really pay attention to what they actually value. And it's nice to see how people are taking the steps that they need to make sure that their family members don't get sick, make sure that other people that they know who are more likely to don't get sick. And out here, we have a really big, here in Colorado, like fitness atmosphere. A lot of people are very much into it. And so I still see people, at least at my nearby park, constantly out and about, soaking in the sun and kind of doing those things. Because all the gyms are closed, so they can't necessarily go there anymore. But I like to look at the positive side of it, I guess. But at the same time, it's just strange times. Strange times we're living in, man.
I would say the biggest effect that it's had on me is like we were talking earlier, is last week I worked 85 hours. That is mind-boggling to me. I don't even know how that happened. My boss texted me and was like, "I'm so sorry. I'm not sure how that happened."
That's crazy.
And that's just because people's kids are not in school anymore, so that affects the workforce tremendously. You've got millions unemployed. It's been crazy. And I'm an essential worker. And while that's nice, it's also like I don't feel like I fit with everyone else necessarily. So, but yeah, it has been interesting.
So you've been helping more like with kids and stuff then? Is that kind of where the extra hours are?
No, I was just saying my coworkers have kids out of school, so they have to stay home. So I'm covering a lot of their shifts.
Gotcha.
I work with old people. I'm a home health aide.
Right.
So
okay. You do tutor though, right? You have at least one set of kids that you tutor.
Well, I don't really need to now because the kids, because they're online, they don't need as much. They're watching class, so they have internet access right there. They can just Google, for the most part, hey, what it is. And they've called me, hey, I have a question about this one specific thing. But other than that, because it's online, I think the teachers are dumbing down a lot of what they're talking about too.
Right.
And going easier on the kids too. So
yeah, no, I have a lot of teacher friends and been trying to keep updated with them as well. And it's just interesting to see how different schools and colleges are taking the news and adjusting accordingly. And it's like resetting, not resetting the society, but kind of like rejigging it in a way where we're having to, as a society, adapt. Yeah. And I'm curious to see how much of it remains after this, because some of the stuff that's happening is good. Like, people are way more aware of their hygiene now, even though I still see dudes picking their nose constantly in cars, which is weird to me. I don't get, like, Why are you picking your nose? Like, don't you know what's going on?
Aren't you aware?
Aren't you aware? Yeah. But
That's funny.
anyway, strange times. And, of course, affecting even our own stuff here, the minor things here on Bard's Backlog. But not affecting our ability to put forth a product, which is what we're going to do today. So with that in mind, let's jump right into the first segment of this podcast, the Games We Playin. Now, Jared, you last week mentioned, or last time we got together anyway, a little Sega Genesis. You bought the mini console, right?
Yeah, it's this tiny little Sega Genesis. It kind of is like the size of your outstretched palm and your outstretched hand, and it plugs it in. I had to find an AV adapter because it's just not that common. I mean, it is pixelated as all get out. I was squinting. I'm like, I don't know why I'm squinting. This does not help. But it's got Sonic the Hedgehog, games I've never heard of, like Mr. Balls is one of them. Several Mortal Kombats, like the first 3 Mortal Kombats. Vector Man. A lot of these very simple 2D, obviously. And Jared, the casual, found out that he lives up to his name and he is not good at many of them.
Yeah, actually, that was like the biggest question I had was like, what's your experience with retro games, and then like just in general?
Not a ton. I retro games, as far as me being a gamer, I only go back as far as the Sony PlayStation 1, the original PlayStation.
Right.
And even then, that was very short-lived because right around the corner was the Nintendo GameCube and the N64 before that. So, I mean, not very long-lived there. I never had a PlayStation 2. I never had a Super PlayStation or a PlayStation 3. I kind of jump from console to console often with the Nintendo wing of things, but not really huge into. I mean, I'm the type of guy that can't even get to the second bonus stage on Galaga, so like I'm just not very good at them.
So then, what drew you like to this Sega Genesis console?
I just thought, I don't know. I really don't. It just the way it was branded and advertised, it just seemed fun. I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. Maybe it can. Maybe I'll get some clout with my uncle or something like that. He'll want to hang out with me more, or something. I just thought, this could be unique. This could be cool. This could be fun. Who knows? I always look at things like that as a chance for connection with other people, and so that was probably my primary motivation.
That's cool. And it's a nice little thing you can kind of like bust out, I'm sure.
Sure.
At some point in the future and be like, look at this neat little thing I have. But
look how old this is.
Yeah.
Pixels are the size of my thumb.
Yeah. Have you enjoyed like really any of the titles on there? Like truly.
I haven't gotten through all of them. There's like over 80 of them.
Wow.
There's like 9 pages worth of titles. And that's another thing too. It blows my mind how much they can pack into this little thing with modern tech. We have so much storage space on tiny micro cards and chips. So I would say I've enjoyed all of them. I'm just not terribly good at them.
Okay. But the novelty, I'm sure, is interesting in and of itself.
Oh yeah, it's fun for sure.
Cool. Well, I mean, that's an encouragement, I would say, just for people out there who maybe are interested in retro games, that they have so many available at like a pretty decent price, I'm assuming.
Yeah, for real. No, it was only like $40 for the whole thing.
Wow.
2 controllers, 60 plus games, something like that. So I think, Josh, you would get more out of it than I would. That's more your like platformers are more your style. But
right, and that was more. But
certainly enjoyable all around. But I want you to tell me about the games you're playing here.
Well, I am actually in between a lot of different games right now, not the least of which is the game that we're going to be talking about today. But one of the main ones that keeps drawing me back and that I have really thoroughly enjoyed over these last few weeks is a game called Ori and the Blind Forest. Now, this game has a really unique origin. It's actually a Microsoft game that came out on the Xbox. It was Xbox exclusive for that period of time that it was on the Xbox, and definitely gained fans, garnered a little bit of its own cult following. It's a platformer, I would say a puzzle platformer with light Metroidvania elements, and I'm a Metroidvania guy through and through. really, when I use that term, what I'm thinking of is more like a jumping platformer game, but with a lot of exploration, a lot of maybe upgrades to your character that are hidden throughout the world. And as you unlock the different upgrades, you get more access to other parts of the world. And this one does that in a lighter way, where you're really just improving your own platforming skills. Like you gain a double jump, you gain the ability to cling onto walls, you gain the ability to float longer periods of time, and it's I call it magical because it is very fairy tale like in the way that it's presented, and that was really like this heartfelt emotional journey that is tied into the game is really what Microsoft was going for when they released it. A surprisingly difficult game. I wouldn't really suggest it to people who aren't willing to die a lot, because you will die more often than you might think. And the game actually kind of takes this into account. There's a lot of very like high precision jumping that has to happen, or a lot of quick decisions you have to make jumping back and forth between different obstacles that might be in your way. And the whole thing takes place, you're like a sprite, like a spirit sprite that comes from this like mother tree, and the tree itself is getting attacked by evil forces, and so the forest itself, the blind forest, the titular blind forest, is kind of like dying out, and it starts out kind of in a sorrowful way where you're the sprite's caretaker, and there's this bond between this caretaker and this, I don't know what this thing is, it's like this big fat thing that like loves the sprite and like feeds it and takes care of it as it grows. They run out of food because the forest is dying out, and so they then you're set out on the adventure to kind of save the forest, and it's very whimsical in that way, and very beautiful, just very beautiful in general, but difficult, definitely something I would be wary of purchasing if it's not something you're willing to deal with. But like I said, the game kind of is aware of that. You can kind of drop your own save spot at any point in time, as long as you have enough energy, and that has saved me more often than not, and I'm constantly having to drop the save point after getting past a somewhat difficult challenge that pops up or arises. And yeah, that's Ori and the Blind Forest. It's notable. It's well worth the purchase if you're into games like that, and the fact that it's even on the Nintendo Switch is unique, just because it was a Microsoft exclusive. Typically, right, they haven't played nice in the past, but this is one of the games. This one, I think Minecraft was their first one that they allowed on other platforms, but this is another one that's kind of like showing Microsoft shifting into maybe more of a universal brand. They're not just sticking to their own hardware like they have in the past, and it's a great grab, really awesome playthrough. So I've been doing that. I'm not quite finished with it yet. I'm about 80% of the way through, and looking forward to finishing that hopefully this week. You have written down here, Jared, Alto's Adventure. What is Alto's Adventure? Is that a part of the pack?
No. This is a totally separate game. This is a mobile game. Going back to the mobile games again, I've been kind of exploring some of the more enjoyable, highly rated mobile games, and Alto's Adventure and its follow-up, which is Alto's World, I think, is one of the most relaxing endless run games you will find out there.
Wow.
The music is gorgeous. I mean, on par with what we're going to talk about later, which is Joe Hisaishi working with Studio Ghibli, that kind of level of but it's simpler and it's smoother, and I would almost say psychedelic in some senses. The color schemes are very pastel. The mechanics are super easy to get used to. The challenges are just enough for a casual like me to like enjoy getting them done, but it also presents some difficulty. So it's not embarrassing how easy it is.
Sure.
It's an endless run snowboard game where you play as Alto as he flies down the mountains of Peru, I want to say, and it's just very relaxing. There's nature sounds. In the first game, you deal with snowstorms, thunderstorms. So you picture that kind of that music that maybe you fall asleep to, with thunderstorm sounds in the background, rain, maybe some gentle wind noises. That kind of ambiance combined with an endless run snowboard game where occasionally you'll outrun a shaman or you'll have to do as many backflips as you can. And very, very enjoyable, very smooth, very highly rated.
Cool. So is it like one of those games where you just have to get in one more run after? Like, depending on how far you get, you might be like, I have just enough time, to jump back into this for just one more run. Does it kind of have that kind of motivation?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it is addicting. They'll give you 3 tasks per run to accomplish, right? And until you beat the game, of course. And on the way, you can unlock a wingsuit that allows you to fly even further. You can unlock a magnet that draws coins to you, that kind of thing. And so, yes, to answer your question, yes, because you're thinking, I can get all 3 in this next run. I can get the last one in this next run. So, for sure.
Nice. Those are the kind of games that I enjoy. On the mobile front, for me, I've been playing a lot of Bejeweled. Have you ever played Bejeweled?
Oh, I love Bejeweled, yeah.
Yeah, it's just been a nice little, the match 3 aspect and, just even the bright colors and everything has just been easy for me to kind of, just do on the side while I'm taking a dump or something,
What I love about those games, that, or listen to a podcast like Bard's Backlog while you play.
hey, I like that plug.
Right? Yeah, I'm all about games like that. Alto's Adventure is the same way. If you do decide to turn off the music, which, it's part of the experience, but if you do decide to turn it off, it's a simple enough game to play while you listen to a podcast or listen to music or something.
Okay, cool. To wrap up this little segment of the podcast here, I just want to take a note and say that I have been playing and putting a lot of my time into Apex Legends.
The line that you have here, it makes me laugh. Most of my time has been spent dropping hot in Apex.
That's what it is. You drop into them hot zones, and then you go and you fight. That's the way I like to do it because the rounds are a little quicker that way. Lots of people try to play it safe in battle royales and land somewhere where there aren't people.
Sure,
yeah. I want that action, so dropping hot is what I like to do, right into the places where there's high loot or what have you. Most of the time I die, so unless I have a good squad around me. But Apex Legends, we've noted it before on the podcast, of course. It's a free-to-play battle royale that you can download on modern consoles, and it is fantastic. I could talk about it all day, and I'm not going to. Hopefully at some point we can cover it ourselves.
For sure.
As one of the games in our backlog. But it is really notable in the realm of battle royales because of its world, the way that it's built. The characters are all fleshed out and inventive, very much like the game Overwatch, if you've played that. It's all character-based, and Apex kind of steals aspects of that. Each of your characters has their own abilities, and the abilities are all very tactical and can make the match or break the match, especially as you're facing off against other squads of 3. And I've just been loving my time with it recently. My wife is actually even more addicted to it than I am. She constantly, it's like her de-stressor at the end of the day. She hops on. Sure. She's actually a lot better than me, funnily enough. And that's the game I've been using to do my streams, part of the Video Game Bard suite of products. Sure. So I'm okay at it, and I do pretty well depending on who I get lined up with me in my squad, because it is squad based. So if you get a couple of jerks or a couple people who aren't going to be playing nice, it can be frustrating. But I've just been loving the game even more and more recently. It's on its 4th season. We talked about Fortnite and how they have their seasonal content.
Right.
Apex is on season 4, and they have a bunch of new additions like the Evo shields. They have access to their original map, Kings Canyon, right now. Little things like that just really keep the game consistently fresh, despite the heavy competition that is in the battle royale genre these days. That's the other game I've been really putting my time into. But with that in mind, those have been the games we're playing. Of course, if you guys are interested in those types of games, Apex is free. I would really highly recommend that. And then, is Alto's Adventure a free game?
I don't remember. I feel like it used to be, and now it costs $2.99.
Okay.
I got it when it was free a while ago, and I just re-downloaded it because
gotcha.
Once you've downloaded it, it's yours. But
personally, I'm kind of a fan of the ones that you can purchase on mobile, because a lot of them are built with kind of microtransactions in mind, or they have egregious amounts of ads. That's the one thing that really ruins my Bejeweled experience.
Yes, I'm with you.
It's just ad upon ad. So the ones that you can purchase, I tend to even have a little more faith in their quality. So I wouldn't be opposed. And maybe I'll look into getting Alto's Adventure.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and jump into the default segment for this week. And for this segment, I really just wanted to take some time and get us into the mood for our game of the week, which has a very anime-esque flair. And just to keep it simple, because Jared, you and I have a great relationship around anime. We're constantly updating each other on the stuff that we're watching and giving our impressions on things. I really wanted to first kind of ask you what's the draw for you to the genre that is anime?
That's a good question. I think because I really like Eastern culture with the sense of it's so interesting how they balance humility and honor on a knife's edge. It's very much, that's a very interesting concept to me as someone who finds, the highly individualized society of American culture sometimes off-putting because it's very me before you at times.
Sure.
So for anime, it seems to me that a lot of characters, they try to write them as truly selfless, and that the enemy is often someone who's simply selfish. And it's that simple of a juxtaposition. So for me, the philosophical background of a lot of the way anime is written, and also to the fantasy world, it's expensive to create a fantasy world. Even the most high budget movies like Transformers, to give a Western example, are so high budget and they're so obnoxious that it crashes their computers. It's so high def. The first movie came out and actually crashed their computers when they tried to run the animations through and the whole film and put it all together. They had to get more RAM. But with animation, with anime specifically, the world is endless because it's simple. It's 2D, not a lot of CG, hopefully, because it's almost never done well. But the world is so much more big because it's not afraid to be more low budget. So there's a lot of draw, but those are two of the big ones. It expands my mind, and it also reminds me of the best parts of human nature.
I agree. No, that's a really good way of looking at it. And a lot of anime is upbeat. It's enjoyable. Even the ones that are darker, you have someone who is fighting for the light.
Sure.
So, I mean, honestly, I know that you could talk my head off about anime, and
yes. So you got to stop me.
I love that about you, and I love that about just our relationship. It's something as we get older that I don't know. I just appreciate that you're even able to recognize and see the parts of it that are valuable. Because a lot of people just kind of write it off, I would say.
Yes. And I'm glad that you let me text you at 3:30 a.m. with dude, what in the world?
I mean, it's great. So with that in mind, after I've picked your brain very briefly about that, what anime, just off the top of your head, would you recommend to someone who might be interested in maybe checking it out for the first time?
The one that you mentioned, I'll let you get to that. But aside from that one, which is a great pick, it kind of just depends on the person. If they're looking for a fantasy adventure and they're okay with the concept of magic and they want really strong, compelling characters, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is top of the line, top notch. If they really liked Avengers, I'd say My Hero Academia. If they're looking for something a little bit more dramatic, and this is the last one I'll suggest because I don't want to just go on and on, but if they're looking for something a little bit more dramatic, I'd say Toradora is a really good emotional roller coaster that's definitely worth the time you put in for that one.
Okay. I would say, I like a little caveat, Full Metal Alchemist especially can be very dark.
Sure. Especially right towards the beginning, yeah.
The beginning especially, and actually that's what I got to, and then I never went past that.
I can understand that, yep.
So it might get a little bit more upbeat and exciting as it goes on, but that would just be a fair warning. My Hero is, I think, one of the best stories being told in this TV generation.
Yes, I agree.
So big recommendation there, and it's one that's incredibly accessible. If you like superheroes, you'll like it, and it's even being better told of a tale than I would say a lot of the other superhero tales that you might get on like a Netflix or a Hulu are being told. So, well worth a recommendation for sure. I always go back to Sword Art Online. And part of that, I think, is because of its tie-in to video games.
Yes.
It just has a really cool idea that's driving it the entire time, and that is like actually living inside of a video game.
Yeah.
And becoming that character with real live stakes, where if you die in the game, you die in real life. And it's really cool the way that they pull it off. But I also often recommend that to people because it was the first one that I got into. And I was able to kind of wrap my head around just like how anime works, the idea of like the beginning song kind of like being its own unique flair. Like they take pride in that intro. Each anime that I've watched, like that's almost one of the bigger parts like of their personality that may come across.
For sure.
And just the ebb and flow of the 20-minute episodes, I think it's just a really good standard. Some might even call it vanilla start to getting yourself into anime. So that's Sword Art Online. Do you recommend all? I haven't seen it all, so I can't. But do you recommend watching all of Sword Art Online, or would you just recommend the first portion?
That's a good question. Same thing about, Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. Caveat, can get dark. The same thing happens with Sword Art Online. For whatever reason, the writer of Sword Art Online had kind of a specific image of what a villain looks like, and it keeps recreating itself in every version of Sword Art Online. Every season, it's the same type of villain every single time. And just fair warning, it does get dark, it does get a little creepy, cringy. So but aside from that, the first 13 episodes I think of Sword Art Online are tremendous, and the first 13 episodes of the second season are also really, really good.
Okay, cool. Well, that was the default segment for us this week. And with that in mind, let's jump into the pick of the week. And that is Ni No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. Ni No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch. I cannot say those. I keep wanting to say White Witch, but there's just a lot of W's. Was released originally in 2011 on the PlayStation 3. It's a JRPG, which stands for Japanese Role-Playing Game, created by Level 5 Games, and most notably, and where a lot of its claim to fame comes from, is that it features art direction and animations from the acclaimed team at Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
Now, Jared, I think we should probably be a little bit honest up front here. How much of the game did you actually play?
I'll just be, to be honest with you, vacation, COVID-19, I'm already making excuses, so it's going to be bad. I didn't get very far. I got a couple hours into the game. Out of 90 total hours of created content, I only got a couple hours in. I feel like that's enough to give me like the tip of the iceberg, and I could talk about it from that perspective. But honestly, yeah, it's that's about as far as I got. Life has been pretty busy. Certainly no hit against the game. That's just how my life has been recently.
Okay, so it's more like tied. Like it wasn't necessarily because of the game itself not being
certainly
appealing.
Not. I'm planning on finishing the thing for sure.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, I would like to finish it too. To be perfectly honest, I didn't get near the end either. I think I put in probably 20 to 25 hours
there
total.
You go. Yeah.
So I was able to see a lot of what the game is trying to do. But I just want to put that out up front just so that people that are aware, you can take what we're saying with a grain of salt.
For sure.
Because we haven't necessarily experienced the entire game. But I quite honestly was satisfied with what I experienced. I don't know if I'll end up ever seeing the credits roll, but I like the game for a lot of reasons, which we're going to talk about. But first and foremost, I think the biggest thing is its Ghibli roots in the world itself. I would say the game is the very definition of heartfelt. Very emotional game. When the game starts off, it starts off innocently enough. You're playing as the character named Ollie, and he's the young boy in a regular world, and it quickly turns tragic, which is very signature with a lot of younger films, I think, sometimes. And the death of his mother comes into play, which serves as the catalyst for the rest of the events. What did you think of the opening first couple hours, Jared?
I enjoyed it tremendously. As the game went on, I kept thinking to myself, more Ghibli, more Ghibli, more Ghibli. And it ended up being, 20 minutes, I think, throughout the whole game, from what I remember, is 20 minutes worth of cutscenes that Ghibli made, which is still like 4 months of production. And considering that it comes from a studio whose owner, the Ghibli owner, now I'm blanking on his name, that's embarrassing, but he doesn't actually...
It's like Miyazaki?
Yeah, Miyazaki, that's right. He doesn't actually like video games. So for him to kind of put his heart and soul into this, you can really feel that they had the same vision when they open the game up and Ollie, is forced to take up a mantle that his mom, she passed on. He's only 13, and you really feel that. And you really like Ollie. Ollie's a very likable character. So
he is.
I'm all about it. I think they handled the opening of the game excellently.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say the whole game itself, and especially as you go further in, it's very Ghibli light in that it's mystical. There's a lot of magical things going on. It's very whimsical and upbeat, and there's even like actual gameplay ties in to the idea of hearts.
Yes.
And hearts are kind of this governing factor even in the gameplay itself. And it's great. There's plenty of mystery too, especially as it starts off. You kind of like are seeing characters like Starry Mary, I remember, is like this person who ends up coming back a little bit later. And Mr. Drippy, who starts out as a doll and ends up being, he calls himself the High Lord of the Fairies, which is double Lord for some reason. Not sure why. He's an awesome character, and he's really, actually, I would say he's kind of carries the heart and soul of the game. I think he's Scottish. I think
so. I think it's Scottish.
It's got a very specific, and that was another thing I liked about it, is that a lot of the characters have very specific voices and very fun voices. And Mr. Drippy, who's your companion throughout the entire game, is just a total gem and really a scene stealer throughout.
And he borders on like really encouraging to like very condescending very easily. Like he switches between the two very fast.
Yeah, he does this thing a little later that I thought was hilarious. They are trying to take there's volcanic eruptions that are occurring, and they're trying to go solve the volcanic eruptions, and he tells them that they only have 3 minutes to do it before it finally explodes. And when they get to the top, he tells them that was a lie, and he was just trying to motivate them. And I thought that was hilarious. Little things like that are just like, the game is really just bursting with Ghibli. I call it Ghibli light, because it's not all Studio Ghibli, but Ghibli character, and really just takes off in that certain aspect of it.
The game is Ghibli light is a great term for it, and I think Ghibli light, I'll say, in the sense that like Miyazaki's name is on this product, and they really went above and beyond to make it clean, smooth. There's not a glitch in the game. Everything works really well as far as functionality, but the look of it too. They spent weeks, if not months, animating Ollie's cape that he gets at the beginning of the game so that it would flow naturally. And if you look too, when Ollie runs down some steps, like he actually like does what you and I do. He steps down the steps, like his fists come into his sides and he like steps with his knees moving. Whereas when he gets on a flat, he's running, light jog. And the attention to detail there is very, like, it's throughout the whole game. It's a very beautiful game. It's very well done mechanically too.
I think it's the attention to detail that really just wraps this whole thing up into a nice, family-friendly package. And the way that the world is tied into the fact that it is a video game, like you are playing this, But the world itself just really bursts through in every aspect of it, even in the menus, in the things that Ollie has to carry alongside him, including a compendium of the world's lore. I don't know if you actually looked into that at all, but there are some like actually riveting tales that are told in the actual little book that I think it's just his wizard book or something. I don't think there's a specific name for it, but it makes the world just feel alive and steeped in its own history. Now, Ni No Kuni itself means second country, based on what I was looking up, or the country of two. So it's this idea of parallel worlds. So you got Ollie's world, and then you've got the magical world, which is where most of the tale takes place. But they're tied together. A lot of the characters have a parallel character in the other world. And it's a common fantasy trope, and I think one that's done well here.
I agree. They play on that really well in the fact that you jump between the worlds to accomplish your goal. And I agree. It's very well done.
Yeah, so that's kind of the biggest draw, I think, of this game. And immediately, I would say this is a family-friendly game. This is a game that kids would love. Something that you could maybe even play with your kid and both enjoy enough.
Yeah.
Because speaking of the game itself and the gameplay itself, the game is surprisingly difficult and pushes back quite a bit. Now, it is a JRPG in the modern sense, and what I mean by that is it's combat where it's combat heavy, and you're going on you face certain encounters with certain enemies, but within the encounter itself, instead of it just being like you pick your move and you attack, and then the other person picks their move and they attack, you're both doing it at the same time.
Yes.
I call it a mix between live action and the actual command inputs you're putting
Right.
into. So it's modern feeling in that way, and it actually makes the game feel quite fluid. And I enjoyed it quite a bit, but it's aimed, I would say, in that place in particular, aimed at an older audience in the way that the gameplay kind of plays out, and it can be very difficult. I mean, you said yourself that was partially kind of why you've taken a step back, right?
Yes, when we had first picked it up a while ago, I'd hit a road bump because of how difficult it was so early on. I was like, what? Because I had intentionally gone and tried to amp up my character. I'd spent all my money to like get better weapons to kind of make my journey easier, just because I wanted to play this game and enjoy it, and that's often easier to enjoy when the game is slightly easier, especially for me as like the cash. So, but yeah, it was surprisingly difficult.
Yeah, a lot of JRPGs kind of force you to grind, and the ones that are the best at kind of balancing that will kind of make you feel like you're slowly getting better as the game gets more difficult. This one has a very steep curve, I would say.
Yeah.
And it continues. Like, as I keep going on, the game has still, like, the challenges jump incredibly high depending on where you are. And you do kind of have to go back and grind a little and gain extra abilities and go back and spend your money on different things to boost your character, like weapons and armor and whatnot. So that can be a bit of an off-putting thing, and definitely something that I would keep in mind if you are playing this with a kid. Just be aware they may need help.
Yeah.
The game itself, the overworld is set up like an old JRPG, and I thought that was kind of funny. You're kind of the same size as some of the villages that you see, at least on the outside.
Yeah.
And as you get to them, of course, you can find these vibrant places where there's a lot of characters and stuff going on. And the towns themselves, I love just how living they feel.
Yes.
How interesting all the different nooks and crannies are.
Absolutely.
And I also like, I don't know if you noticed this, but a lot of the side quests are not forced upon you. When you stumble across them, they're not necessarily like a lot of games are kind of built on side quests being these things that are not only necessary for your character, but can kind of be like fetch questy, where you're kind of just going and doing something for no good reason.
Right.
This game has those, but it's not really forced on you, and really you don't need to engage with them any more than you have to. And when you do, the reward is there. You get a lot of stuff out of it, including meeting a lot of interesting and kooky characters. So I really liked that aspect of the gameplay itself. And like I said, a lot of the game itself is contextualized within the world. So even your backpack, the telling stone is what they call this guy who's like full of all the tutorials.
Yeah.
That really helps this whole thing just feel like this vibrant, magical, mystical, fantastical other country. And thoroughly enjoyed those aspects of it for sure. I don't think there's a whole lot more to talk about as far as the gameplay is concerned. If the way that it's been described appeals to you, I definitely recommend playing through the game. If this is something, like if you've never played a JRPG, I would be careful and wary about jumping into this one because of the difficulty spikes. And if you've played JRPGs maybe in the past and you didn't like the command input aspect of it, where you kind of take turns fighting each other,
Right.
This is a nice blend between the two. So that might be something that's interesting for you.
I see that you have in your notes here that it's compared to Pokemon, and I was actually going to say that too. You know, it will remind you of Pokemon just in the sheer number of familiars that you have, the fact that they level up or evolve, if you wanted to say, and also too the command input as well. You know, for me as someone who's new to JRPGs, it kind of was frustrating at first, the mechanic that like when one of your characters dies, like you also die, like HP is shared, you know, which is something that, to be honest, to be very frank, is new to me. And so that was a little frustrating at times. And I would also like to say that the game, you know, kind of having you jump back and forth at times felt tedious, but as is the case with most video games that make me like move around manually, I can't just fast travel everywhere like I, you know, maybe used to in Breath of the Wild or Skyrim or something like that. When they make me traverse the world, I enjoy it more. And so at first I thought it was tedious. I feel like I remember telling you that, but I would recommend it for sure to someone who's looking for a Ghibli light adventure with an innocent and enjoyable protagonist.
And I gotta say, like, getting back to the Ghibli light aspect, if you don't know what we're talking about, of course, Studio Ghibli is well renowned for their animated movies.
Legendary. Absolutely.
Legendary, and they're gorgeous, all of them. And they're also family friendly and whimsical, and have a lot of ideas of like a lot of times like loss of innocence. I think I've like noticed, or like how mysterious the world can be and even frightening in its own way. And that is just built into this game's design at a fundamental level. And it's the characters that make this world come alive. Like, the character design itself is top notch.
I'm with you, yeah.
And I have there written down, like, look no further than Mr. Drippy, who is... I love him. Like, I love that guy so much. He makes me laugh consistently, and his Scottish accent is always coming out, and he's always saying little interesting things. And I like that they even spell out the words.
Yeah.
As
it bit sounds. Feisty in it.
Yeah.
It's like, and it's, you know, it's like bit feisty in it, and it like isn't it, you know, he says in it, and it's EN apostrophe IT.
It's great. And even the common monsters, like you kind of said, like if you're comparing it to Pokemon, there's a huge appeal in Pokemon because of the monster design, and this game competes like on that level with just a lot of interesting and funny characters, and a lot of them have like goofy names, and it's pleasant. It's just a genuinely pleasant game,
absolutely
pleasantly designed.
Yep.
And you brought up earlier the cutscenes. Which I think are just like great and thoroughly surprising, because I don't think the game's, well, maybe the game does start out with a cutscene, but as I kept going in, whenever there was a big character moment or a big story moment, they took the time to fully animate it and put it in the game, and those moments really just make the whole thing stand out even more. And you can see the Ghibli hand, especially, of course, coming from the studio. In those moments especially. Yeah,
you're right. I really did, as I was playing, like, more Ghibli, more animated cutscenes, you know, but it really does set apart the special moments in the game when you have an animated cutscene from just kind of the normal, you know, here's what's happening next kind of thing. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and it's not the only game that does that.
Right.
Persona 5 is really... like uses animation and animated scenes well in its own way, but the fact that this is like a younger, like a younger toned game, and the fact that it like commits, I think, to the high quality in a way that just clicks is really admirable. I'd say there's a good combination of just like reading the text on the screen, but then also hearing the characters talk, and then having the fully fleshed out cutscenes. And it just really makes me want this game to be something that I could experience as either a series or as a movie. Like I would love to be able to, and Persona 5 does that, and maybe that's where I'm getting it from. Persona 5 has its own anime. Each of the Personas, I believe, at least up to 3, have their own like series built completely separate from the game. I would love it if Ni No Kuni did the same thing, because that's how interesting this world is. So I guess just to wrap things up, as we begin to talk a little bit more about whether or not this game should be entered into the Hall of Games, I do want to say, even if you're not a Ghibli individual, would you say this game is worth the purchase, Jared?
Yeah. No, you had said something along the lines of it's a good bang for your buck, and I totally agree. Totally agree.
Yeah, and it's older. But you can't tell because of the way that the game is designed.
You really can't, yeah.
And that's notable and worth saying, because you could drop, I think the game typically is only $40. A lot of the times you'll find it in sales. Like I purchased mine during a sale for I think $5, and that's bang for your buck. You get 50 hours of like mainline gameplay, and then you also get another plus 40, like you said, of just extra content on top of it. Yep. Well worth the purchase if you're even lightly interested in what we've talked about thus far. And I would also say any self-respecting Ghibli fan would be serviced well and should purchase this game if you're even mildly interested, because it's at that quality. Would you say, Jared, though, despite all these things, and despite the fact that we haven't even finished the game, that it is worth entry into the Hall of Games?
You might hate me for this, and feel free to chastise me later, but I'm going to be totally blank with you. Like, I looked up JRPG earlier. Google says the top 20 JRPGs you must play: Final Fantasy, Illusion of Gaia, Lunar, Ni No Kuni, Phantasy Star, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy, Xenogears, Legend of Heroes, and it goes on and on. Earthbound. I have not played any of these. And so for me, I really have nothing to compare it to. I haven't even played Kingdom Hearts, and I really am not, a Pokemon buff. So I'm going to have to defer to you, Josh, if that's okay. If you think it should be in there, I'm with you, because I like the game. I really like it, but I really have nothing to compare it to. Whereas with Fortnite, I can compare it to Apex or PUBG or, other battle royales. I don't have a frame of reference for this game, so I have to kind of defer here.
So is this your first JRPG then?
It might be. Like I said, I haven't played Kingdom Hearts, and I haven't played any Final Fantasies. I haven't played Earthbound. I'm kind of looking. I've played RPGs, but not really. I think so.
Well, I then defer back to you real quick then. Would you say, as a first excursion into the idea of a JRPG, that this is a good one?
As far as the story goes, 10 out of 10. As far as the mechanics, I think I need to play more, to be honest with you. They seem, like I had said, a little, I'll say, quote unquote, unfair to me. And the the difficulty spike was a little disheartening at first, because, I do like to relax and enjoy my games for the most part, especially when I know I'm in it for the long haul. This is going to be 50 hours minimum of my time. You know what I mean? So
right.
I was a little disappointed in the mechanics. Not that there's anything wrong with them. It's been an extra sharp learning curve for me. So I do like it, and I wouldn't have a problem with it if you were to, pop it into the Hall of Games.
Well, I would say, like, the game's design and world itself really just stand on their own 2 feet in a way that few JRPGs do.
I could totally.
And even those games that you were listing off, like games you must play, I like a lot of those I see as off-putting to someone who would be kind of maybe semi-interested in, like, oh yeah, I've heard of the JRPG before, like that genre, let's check it out. A lot of those would buff you even more so than this game. So with all that said, I really do believe this is a high-quality JRPG, one of the best you could purchase. And for that reason, I say it's entered into the Hall of Games.
I like it.
So, ka-chunk! With that in mind, the game is in our Hall of Games. So, Ni No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, a fantastic game. I will say, be wary of the second game. I have heard, I have not played it yet. I do own it. I own way too many games. I have like a ginormous backlog. But I would say, be wary of the second one. I've heard that one's not nearly as good. But this one, there's a special feeling to it, man. Like I can't even fully explain it here, but it got the fantastical whimsy that I was hoping it would get, and it nails it on the head. And it's a fairly like challenging game to boot, which I like. I like the challenge, and I like the fact that it's willing to push back on you, maybe a little bit too much at times, and it does get to be a bit grindy where you have to go and kind of up your character a little bit. But it's so like joyous of a game, and like I said, heartfelt. That it's worth the time that you put into it. It really is.
Yep.
So with that in mind, this has been episode 4.5 of Bard's Backlog. Thank you guys for joining us this week. Again, you guys can reach us on Twitter at Video Game Bard for me, and Jared at Jared T. Ben. And we will all see you next time. Thanks for listening.